I met Ruby in 2020, just after COVID happened. She was crewing on a boat in French Polynesia to get more experience in sailing. We never lost contact, and when she bought her own boat and decided to cross the Pacific on her own from Mexico, I happened to be in the Marquesas Islands, where she had her landfall. It was so nice to welcome her and to greet and accompany her into the bay. And of course, we had a great party that evening. Her life is a story by itself, so we decided for an interview. Welcome to Sailor's Life. Today I'm on Makani, a Jeannot 39. Ruby crewed on a lot of boats before buying her own boat. From this experience, she had a precise idea of what her new boat should be like and which equipment was important to her. Good morning, Ruby.
Hi, Jutta. Come on in.
Thank you so much for having me on your boat.
Oh, you're welcome. Come on in. It's my humble abode.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, let's sit down and talk a little bit.
Alrighty.
Ruby, do you want to tell us a little bit why you started sailing?
Well, I had a devastating life change. Happened unexpectedly, and I happened to get an invitation to sail on a 50-foot ketch from Dutch Harbor, Alaska, all the way down to Australia. It was a 7-month journey, and that was literally my springboard into sailing.
You didn't have any idea about sailing?
Oh, not a clue. Not a clue. In fact, I was so clueless. I really didn't know what I was getting into when I agreed to do this trip from Alaska to Australia. It turned out to be, you know, when you're sailing the North Pacific, it's treacherous seas. It's not like a walk in the park. And I think part of the beauty of this was that I was ignorant to the danger, and I was naive about what sailing was all about. And I happened to be on board on a boat that is captained by a guy who had been circumnavigating for 3 years. In fact, he had circumnavigated 3 different times around the globe. So he was a well-studied captain, and I was in really good hands. And I think that helped fuel a deeper level of naivete, because I really wasn't asked to do much on board. And I just spent a lot of time up on deck and absorbing everything that was coming my way. I could not believe the beauty of the sea, and it was almost hypnotizing. And I think that was part of the seduction of sailing, was that sort of, it captured me in a really, really deep way.
So, and after that you decided this should be your future life on a boat?
Well, I don't know if I made a conscious decision like that, but I did decide that I wanted to learn more about sailing. And I started to wake up that there were certain websites that you could go on and offer yourself as a crew. And I began crewing for couples all over the world. And then I spent the next 7 to 8 years doing that. And that's really where the rubber hit the road, where I learned everything I could about sailing. And I sailed on 9 different boats, probably about 3 years in the Med, Greece, Italy, Turkey. Turkey was one of my favorites, and just learned everything I could. And you know, the etiquette of sailing is really different in different parts of the world. There's different types of anchoring styles, different ways of approaching a harbor. Even sort of the culture of sailing is different in different parts of the world. And so I was exposed to all these variabilities in sailing, which made it even more attractive, because it's definitely not a static lifestyle. It's very dynamic, and it changes depending on where you are in the world.
And I bet it's also different on each kind of boat, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, by far. I mean, I went from some great luxury monohulls to very simple 32-foot boats. So I had kind of a real, insight into what size boat would work for me, and some of the luxuries that I really enjoyed, and some of them that, were unnecessary. And, for instance, I came across a boat that had a water maker for the first time, I think in 2015 or 2016. And that was remarkable to me. I didn't know you could make water on a boat. And of course, I added that to my list, that when I get my boat, I want a water maker. So you get that idea of, I was exposed to a lot of different styles and ranges, and I took what I preferred from each one.
When did you feel ready to think about having an own boat?
You know, the moment I felt ready was actually when I had an accident at sea. Not my accident, but somebody else's accident. We were sailing. I was with a couple. We were sailing to Marquesas. This was, I think, 2017, 2018. And we had an accident at sea. The captain climbed the mast to untangle a halyard, and we got hit by a swell and he fell into the water. He broke his back, shattered his foot. We rescued him and then diverted course to Hawaii. Now, he was out of the equation. So the captain wasn't sailing any longer, and it was just his wife and myself sailing the boat another 2,800 miles. And it was during that leg of the passage that I realized, A, why am I always on somebody else's boat? And B, I can now sail. I did the bulk of the sailing on that boat. His wife was very comfortable at the helm, but she wasn't comfortable with sail changes or creating sail plans, and I was. That was one of my favorite parts. So I began to realize my own capacity and potential against the backdrop of this accident. And that woke me up to the fact that I was ready to buy a boat. You know, I made offers on 5 different boats over the course of 2 years, and because I had exposure to so many boats, I had basically a list of what I wanted, what I was really looking for. A swim step is one of them. I wanted a boat about between 43 and 39 feet. I wanted a boat that was more European in flavor. I wanted a water maker, things like that. I definitely wanted an inline galley, which isn't the best at sea, but was for me what I preferred. But it took me 2 years to find that boat. This boat I love. In fact, I'm going to announce our engagement to my boat. You know, I love my boat so much. It's perfect for me.
When was that then?
That was 2 years ago. No, wait, that was 2021, September 2021. Yeah.
And where did you buy it?
I bought her in Mexico, in Guaymas, Mexico.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a French boat. Bought it from a French couple, and even to this day, they're very much involved whenever I have a question or whatever. They're right there for me. In fact, when I made this crossing, the guy was constantly checking in on me and making sure I was okay, and I had a few questions for him, and he was right there for me. So they were a constant line of support, even though they no longer own the boat. I believe they love this boat as much as I do.
That's very good if you buy a boat from somebody like that.
Definitely, definitely.
So Ruby, at one point you decided to teach other women how to sail. How did you get that idea?
You know, that all started in the anchorages. I had quite a few married women come up to me and ask me if they could come and day sail with me because their husbands... There's basically a barrier between a husband and a wife. It's very difficult to learn from the husband. And in this particular instance, I was in Zihuatanejo, Mexico, and I had several women come up to me independently of each other and ask me if they could go out on day sails. At that time, in this particular bay, I would leave the bay and do day sails, and two of them would join me. And I started showing them how to do things. I asked them, what do you want to learn? And that began to create a momentum of an idea in my head that, you know, it's not just women who are sailing with their husbands that don't know how to sail. It's possibly women all over the place. And in fact, I was surprised that I was one of a handful of women single-handing in Mexico. And, you know, single-handing a boat, it does take guts, but so does driving a car. So does traveling abroad. There are a lot of things that women do that already take a lot of fortitude, and sailing a boat is no different than anything else. So I decided to codify it, and I created a website, and somehow women found me, and I began teaching women for the next 2 years. And most of the women, by the time I was done with them, after 10 days of living and breathing sailing on my boat, and I only have one woman at a time, could take my boat out. We would sail, she would sail off anchor and take my boat out, figure out a sail plan, navigate around the bay, and bring the boat back in and drop the hook. And to me, that was a successful lesson for a woman to really understand the full concept of sailing and her realization of her capacity and her potential. It is way more than getting an ASA certification. It's realizing that this isn't just about sailing. There's a whole bigger picture involved when you put yourself to the test and find that you can do something that originally you thought was completely crazy or, you know, impossible to achieve.
So it must have given them a lot of confidence.
Definitely, definitely. And it was, you know, there was a beautiful exchange that happened because it gave me such pleasure to teach women what I was doing. You know, it took me 7 to 8 years to really learn how to sail. And to be able to show a woman in a condensed time period in 10 days really how to set a boat up for sailing and take it out, it was such pleasure. Now, against that, you know, experience and time on the sea and learning how to deal with different sea states, you know, that comes, you know, as part of a package. But within 10 days, these women now knew they had the capacity to be able to go out and have the confidence for different sea states or different types of weather or gusts of wind that might be bigger than they expected.
But do you know if these women now, with this knowledge, with this new knowledge, still had harmony on the boat with their husband?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So 2 of the women that I've taught, they've both been sailing with their husband for a considerable amount of time, and they both came up with a plan where each of them shared captains. So one of them would be a captain for the day. So in particular, I'll give you an example. One of my students, because, you know, women's bodies are framed differently and our strength is different, we also problem solve in a different way. And so when it was her day to be captain, her husband had to realize that she kind of understood what she was doing, but it wasn't going to be the way that he would do it. And that was the place that they had to reach an agreement that on her day for captaining, it's going to look very different than when he does it. And as far as I know, they're continuing forward in a harmonious fashion. So,
well, anyway, for security, it's always good if both of the couple know what you have to do.
Yeah, it is absolutely astounding to me how many women don't even know how to turn on the engine on their boats. There's an interesting dynamic that happens that plays out on a boat between men and women. You know, men have, if the woman doesn't know anything about what's going on the boat, including not turning on the engine, and, you know, her duties are primarily domestic, making food and cleaning, the husband or the male has supreme power. And what ends up happening is that the woman feels almost traumatized, because if something happened to the husband, she has no path forward to save him or to save herself. And this is where the kind of the nexus of teaching women really was born, is back in that anchorage, you know, 2-3 years ago when I was teaching women, a lot of them didn't know the very, very basics of their boat. And that is scary.
2 years ago, you decided for the next big step, a solo crossing of the Pacific.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I decided that I wanted to attempt crossing the South Pacific to Marquesas, French Polynesia, on my own. And I recognized that it was going to take about 2 years to get my boat ready, and myself. Getting my boat ready included new rigging, new running rigging. I got a new transmission. I did so much work on the boat because recognizing when you are sailing for 30 days continuously, things are going to break. And one of my biggest fears is something breaking and not knowing how to fix it. Setting that aside, the other prep that I did was preparing myself. I practiced maneuvers. I did so much sailing, making sure that I understood my boat inside and out. I understood how she felt. In fact, there was a point during the trip where she felt really stressed, and I only knew that because I had sailed her so often. I had, at the end of the day, I have over 40,000 nautical miles under my belt. With this boat, I think it's close to 10,000 nautical miles. And so I really put the time in with my boat to understand how she behaves and how I behave, especially when I'm alone and when I'm confronting fear.
And now, having done this crossing, did that change your personality? Did it change yourself mentally?
That's a really good question. Yeah, who I was when I left Mexico is not who I am now. I definitely had some kind of transformation. Part of that transformation, I think, is sort of steeped in gratitude. I feel a deep, deep gratitude towards my friends. I had people reach out to me and lend me support, just even little simple texts. I feel much more, a bigger range of gratitude than I had before. And I also feel a lot more relaxed. I think, you know, in sailing they have this theory or this saying that, you know, you really don't want to plan too much. And I'm now really, really embracing that, because as long as you understand the weather and you understand how your boat will behave in that weather, it opens up all these different possibilities. And I feel like I am more connected to a flow than I was before I left Mexico. There was one night in particular I felt very lonely, and I remember scanning the horizon for another boat. It had been weeks since I had seen another boat. It made me question some of my routing choices. Like, where is everybody? Over 60 boats left Mexico to sail to French Polynesia. Of course, not at the same time, but I expected to see a few boats around me, but weeks and weeks went by before I really saw anybody. And then one night in particular, I remember scanning the horizon for a boat, looking at my chart plotter and seeing if AIS was picking up another boat, and nothing was out there. And so it did feel really lonely, but it was brief. And I think I needed to have that experience, because on the other side of loneliness is this capacity for love. And, you know, I felt mostly that during my crossing, this great capacity, as though I was in a network or a web of something much bigger than myself. And I knew without a doubt I would be just fine. But that one night, I think I needed to have sort of the texture of loneliness to really understand what exactly I was up to, what I had gotten myself into. Sorry.
I mean, you did have Starlink now in your crossing. If you
Yeah.
think about other people who didn't have that and they weren't able to have any contact.
You make a really good point. You know, even in just the last 2 years, the evolution of sailing has taken on such a momentum that is astounding. I mean, when you look at Joshua Slocum, who really didn't have anything when he circumnavigated, and now where I have an Iridium Go, which is satellite connected, I have Starlink, which I can connect to, you know, Facebook, Instagram. I can have a conversation with my mom if I wanted to. The concept of loneliness probably lifts in a different way. But I can tell you at the end of the day, when you're out there and it's dark, that curtain of loneliness descends, and you do feel that you are separated from everybody else. Yeah.
So, but you did get on with yourself.
Oh, yeah. I had a really good time with myself. I mean, the beauty of just sailing by yourself is that, you know, I didn't have to really cater to anybody. I could always sit in the shade in my cockpit. I got along great with myself, and I read a ton, which is one of my favorite things to do. So, yeah.
When you had landfall after 30 days, did you have to practice to speak before you
I don't know, you tell me.
Well, you were screaming like hell when we welcomed you.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think there was almost a suspension of disbelief when I saw land. The first moment I saw land, it was a very misty image of Hivaoa. Very much like a dream, like you can't quite focus on it, and you're getting closer and closer. And that day I was in a very, very big sea state, and I remember feeling relief that I could see land. And then I'm going through a channel between two islands, and then I round the tip of an island, and I see all these boats. And it really was a hard concept for me to grasp that I made it. When I arrived, I had friends come out and welcome me in dinghies and blow their horns, and I was out of my mind excited. I couldn't even contain the energy. It was so remarkable. I couldn't believe I had actually done this. I had always, part of the thing that I did to prepare myself for this trip was always envision myself arriving, but I didn't envision that arrival. And so I was even more blown away by having my friends around me, and you know, they escorted me into an anchorage, and unfortunately my anchor didn't drop correctly, but we fixed that. But you're almost in a state of suspension because you've been alone for so long at sea. You haven't talked to anybody, you haven't seen anybody, and I felt it took a long time for my brain to catch up to the reality of my own arrival.
you told me that you came across an abandoned boat in the
Yeah.
middle of the Pacific. That sounds really scary. I mean, you've been there at daytime, but if that would have been nighttime.
Yeah. So in 2013, I think it was November, October 2023, a boat was dismasted, which means the mast and rigging came down. A very, very scary thing to happen on a boat out in the middle of the South Pacific. There happened to be, I think, 3 people on board, and they were rescued. But I came upon this boat not knowing its history, and it happened during the daytime. I was making repairs up on deck, and I happened to look up and see this sort of sliver of silver in the sea, and I originally thought it was a whale, and that it was a dead whale. Maybe it had been turned over, and I got closer and closer. I was going to hit it, and I diverted my course until I was about 100, 200 meters off of whatever it was, and as I got closer, I saw that it was a dismasted boat. A very, very scary thing to come upon, because I didn't know the history, so I didn't know if there was a rescue, so I went around the boat 3 times blaring my horn to see if there were any survivors. I contacted someone in Mexico who is responsible for emergency protocols and asked him if he could find anything out about the boat, and I sent a video of it. Turned out he told me that it was a successful rescue. Nobody was on board. It was a navigational hazard. I was extremely lucky not to hit that at night.
So the AIS didn't work anymore on that boat?
No.
Yeah.
No, the AIS didn't work, and if I had hit that boat at night, it would have been a catastrophe. I would have sunk my boat. I got a lot of questions about why I didn't scuttle that boat. Scuttling a boat means when it's been damaged, you sink it. And remember, I'm a single-hander on my own boat. It's absolutely impossible for me to tie up to this boat and scuttle it, sink it. If I was to do that, I would probably go down and lose my own boat. It was, you know, it's not possible for a single-hander to scuttle a boat.
I don't know what your originally plans were before you left, but did this crossing change your plans?
No, I think this crossing cemented my plans. I really have a huge desire to circumnavigate, and I want to take my time circumnavigating, because the world is unbelievable, and when you see it from a sailboat, you have access to places that most people don't have access to. I want to do something that is unusual and meet unusual people and see this world. This world is incredible. And it saddens me that more people don't make an effort to see it, because it's unbelievable. And sailing brings you up close and personal to that magic. But there's another sort of kind of sidebar to that, is that a lot of women my age think that life is over, or they can't do things anymore, or they don't have the capacity to learn anything new. And I want to be a blueprint for women. I want to show them that, you know, if I can do it, because I'm not really that unusual. I'm pretty much, you know, normal. I never did anything risky, or, you know, I wasn't a rock climber or anything like that. I just fell into this and fell in love with it. And for women, when they turn 50, something changes. Society treats them different. They start to feel invisible, and I want to be, you know, that roadmap for women to show them that, oh, keep going. You're just starting, and the world will open up to you when you put a little effort into moving forward. Don't worry that you may, you know, be experiencing something different at home and it's no longer, you know, a piece of cake. It's just a signal that you need to move on, and you can definitely do this.
Ruby, sailing solo, that means solo, but isn't sharing also a nice thing? So don't you think sometimes, oh, sharing also would be nice? You know, I can do it myself, but sharing?
Well, it depends on what you mean by sharing.
Happy moments and difficult moments, both, but also happy moments.
Yeah. You know, I have some really great friends, and I am very lucky to buddy boat with friends. Buddy boat means that we will take our individual boats and go to the same location. Not always do we go at the same speed or at the same time, but there's sort of a check-in process and a buddy system, a friendship that emerges, and you are sharing things with each other that way. Maybe for me, what I'm reluctant to do is to lose my autonomy. I have absolute autonomy on my boat, and sharing for me doesn't necessarily mean sharing my space or my autonomy.
Thank you so much for having me here on your boat, Ruby.
Oh,
and
you're welcome.
I really love your stories. It's great, and I bet a lot of women appreciate what you said.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you have any more questions that we haven't discussed yet, please write them in the comments so that I can ask my next interview partners about them. Subscribe my channel Sailors Life if you want to hear more facts, experiences and stories. Give me a thumb up and press the bell if you don't want to miss any of these informations.